have been developing this model for a few years from the work I've been doing in psychotherapy. And I was finding the same elements that were coming once and again in different processes from people, realizing how important it was, the evidence and the signs that people would get from their interactions, their relationships. So this is a model for relationships. And when I say relationships, I mean anybody that you relate with through a period of time. You know, if you even have an acquaintance, somebody that you buy some product from, if you have a relationship through time, that interaction makes it a relationship. You create an understanding of who they are. You have your preconceptions of who they are. You have assumptions, and you interact from that knowledge that you have from that preconception. So this can be applied again to these kind of acquaintances, to friends, to co-workers, to community members, to friends, family, partners, in any way. So I have been realizing very much that in which way we like and we get the best out of relationships. I think the biggest experiences, the most holistic experiences that we feel in relationships is when we feel being ourselves and when we feel seen by who we are. So for me, this is why the core element here is this authentic self, this element of authenticity. I think there's a big part of us that lands in safety and even in joy of living when we are feeling being authentic. And then for me, is how do we see this very practically in interactions? And for me, the most practical behavioral element that you can see in which authenticity plays part is consideration, a very sincere consideration. We feel considered when we are feeling treated by who we are, for how people know we are. If we come to someone and say, hey, I know this is important for you, I'm doing this for you, and we feel seen, we feel heard, we feel acknowledged by who we are, we feel considered. And then when we are considered to others, it's a similar thing. We are treating them according to what we know of them, and we're trying to express our care, our affection by incorporating who they are, really. Okay, and we're going to understand how this actually happens, because again, our mind can get in the way, some impressions can get in the way, but sincere consideration is what we really want to arrive at in the matter of this container of interactions in relationships. Okay, so the first element that, because I'm going to talk about three big aspects of how we can get here to this sincere consideration. And the first element that I would like to tackle is the element of responsibility. And when I talk about responsibility, is the real sense of accountability, like how much power do I have to control things? And in this sense, we have to really understand that we can only be responsible of our own thoughts and feelings. We cannot be responsible of other people's thoughts and feelings. And why is that? Is because thoughts and feelings are not a direct consequence of reality. Is a result of the interpretation of reality. You know, if I push this board to the floor, that's a direct consequence of my actions. I'm fully responsible of that. But when I do something to another person and they will interpret my actions and they will develop their own thoughts and feelings, that's something that is away from my control. So it's very important to see that we cannot feel responsible of other people's thoughts and feelings. Again, we can be very considered. But what shifts here very much is that when we don't feel responsible of other people's thoughts and feelings, we can give our best and then not expect any particular consequence from our actions. We don't feel guilt by not being able to take away the sadness of a person that we care for. And we're not feeling blamed because we are not managing to take away the sadness of this person that we care for. So in this case, we can be there for other people. We can be considered. We can be fully present and giving our best, but we will deal with the truth, with what are the context, what is the concept, what is the capacity of ourselves, our limitations, our own energy, our own resources. Because then mainly we are responsible of our thoughts and feelings, meaning I have to realize that I may not be in a position sometimes to give as well. So we're going to explore more of these things in detail. So this is the first thing that we have to acknowledge. In the same way, we cannot expect other people to be responsible of our feelings. That is a similar scenario. Now, if I'm the person that is feeling sad, and for somehow I'm feeling alone, and I feel like people don't care about me, and I feel like if people would love me, they would come and check in and would ask me how I'm feeling. I'm staying in a victim mode in a way. And I'm not realizing that it's my responsibility to say, hey, I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling lonely. What can I do about it? Instead of expecting other people to come. So by us taking responsibility of that, I can go and check in with someone. Hey, how are you doing? I'm going through this thing. And I give information for the other one to be considered. I allow people to be considered. I'm not acting from a demanding attitude of, hey, how haven't you called me? I'm sick, You see, so this is very important, how to deal with the element of responsibility and how by addressing and be responsible only about our thoughts and feelings, we can allow space for consideration. And we're going to see how this is connected with these other elements. So just to wrap up this thing, we can only be responsible about our thoughts and feelings. We cannot be responsible of other people's thoughts and feelings, in which we eliminate guilt and blame. And we are not expecting other people to be responsible of our thoughts and feelings, eliminating this whole aspect of expectations. Another big area is the element of mindsets. This is where are we coming from in our vision, from our minds, from our thoughts, from our beliefs. And it's very common sometimes that we try to go to this space of interaction. We try to connect to others from a mindset of what is right and what is wrong. We're coming from these morals, and when I say morals is what you've been conditioned with, what you have been educated with. It's not your own sense of ethics, your own developed sense of integrity, something that you make yours. This is different. Morality is usually something that is based on conditioning, and you're repeating a script that is very impersonal. You're saying, this is the way a friend behaves. You are not acting according to the script of how a friend should be, meaning you're in the wrong. And you owe me, or you are hurting me because you're not acting as you're supposed to be. And this is very impersonal. It's taking you very far away from who you really are, from your authentic self. The real way to connect with this authenticity is just to deal with the truth, what is happening. I don't have to tell you what is the script of being a good friend. I just have to say, by the way you're behaving, I'm feeling this way. And I allow you to deal with reality. I'm not telling you how it should be supposed to be. So again, it's important to understand that morality, when we are bringing it with us, is the element of conditioning that we're passing, that we're receiving, and we're acting from that thing, that script from which we were told that we should function from. And when we do it to others, we're doing the element of projection. So we're projecting the script. If I'm saying, this is what a proper lover does, and I'm expecting this thing, I'm just projecting my own sense of the morality to other people. That is not just not acknowledging my own truth, but it's also not allowing them to be in their own truth, because then I don't get to see who is the other one, how are they functioning, how are they feeling, because that's the only way we can truly relate, from the truth, not from a sense of expectations of how things should be. Okay, so this is one big aspect. On the other side, we have like the counterpart of this, that is basically what I call the hard space, or we can call it the emotional motivation. For me, it's very connected with the giving. Where are we giving from? And sometimes we can even see that apparently, even wholeheartedly, people is in an attitude of giving and giving and giving. And they believe that giving is the only way to live, because somehow it's considered service, it's considered something that even can reach a higher goal. But we're not realizing that by giving and giving and giving in the sense of duty, this is a movement that is not sustainable. If we only have outputs, we don't have enough inputs to maintain ourselves, right? We are still in a human body, we still have to eat, we have needs to meet. And this is why we can go into this very self-demanding attitude of acting out of duty, giving out of duty. And we realize that because it's not sustainable to keep on giving only, we realize that underneath there is an expectation of transaction. Because then is when we come into these narratives of, I'm giving my best, what about you? Or I'm giving all this sacrifice to this attitude, what about you? I'm neglecting myself for this, what about you? So it's almost like a competition of who is more self-demanding, who is more sacrificial. And this is again completely moving you away from being you and your authenticity. It's more acting from this idea that we all have to give, and we only get back if other people also give in this sacrificial way. So we see that this is not acting from the truth, it's not connecting with our authenticity. And I believe that the only way to truly give is from generosity. That is giving with no expectations. And sometimes actually we cannot do this. So I would say if you cannot give out of generosity, well, don't give them. Maybe you need to be with yourself. Maybe you need to be responsible of your own thoughts and feelings and connect to some self-healing attitude to be in a safer space to work with yourself. And we're going to explore more of that self-work a little bit later. You see, so this is very important to realize that the generosity is when we give with no expectations. We give by this joy of giving. And we really don't care how is the other person going to respond, because it's just from the joy of giving. And this is the only way to respect a movement that is really wanting to give. This is generosity. This is giving truthfully, let's say. But then if we continue in this duty or transaction, we're going to keep in these loops in which we are going far away from what we really need, and we're going into patterns that are very dysfunctional and very self-demanding and very away from this authentic self. Okay, so these are these three dimensions, and as you can see, I put these little symbols of what you can call the unwanted paths, or the paths that would lead you away from living from your authenticity. And for me, these are symbols of reflection. Because of course we can go there. This is very common. We are human. We get there. This is a very common element, and this is what I've been seeing a lot in my work. So, but these are opportunities to do the self-work. So I'm putting this symbol for reflection here as the cue to do the self-work. And what is this self-work based on? It's really connected with developing safety or regaining safety. Because when we go into these four aspects, we usually feel a tension, we feel fear, we feel that something's going to go wrong. So we actually need to go back to a safe space to connect with who we are, and then to act from a truthful standpoint. So I'm giving you like a few tips on this from this model of how I believe it functions quite practically. And for me, again, you feel yourself that you're in any of these four parts of the model. And this is when you say, okay, for example, I'm catching myself going into this duty of just giving, and I believe that this is the only way for me to feel validated. So I just feel that I'm going into this self-demand in the giving. I'm not respecting myself. I just feel it's off. These things usually, they feel off in the body. You can really connect with your intuition, with your gut feelings. We feel like something's off. And then you observe. Hopefully you can get where you are. But even if it's just off, you can just go directly here and say, okay, I need to observe myself. And for me, the first part is to explore these layers. That is something that you do on your own. And you explore these layers, and usually you're going to see that the first thing you see is, yeah, there's a fear. I'm afraid that something wrong will happen. And then you have to explore, okay, what is this fear? Okay, so I'm acting from this duty, I'm acting from this performance. I need to just prove myself that I'm worthy by giving, because it's the only way I believe people can appreciate me, for example. So then I'm afraid that I will not be appreciated if I don't keep on giving. I will not be loved, let's say. So that's my fear. But the fears are usually the tip of the iceberg of your history, your wounding, what you have experienced in your life that have created emotional imprints that will react from moments of your present. This is the triggers from the woundings. So you can have, I can say, this fear of me is not feeling acknowledged, not feeling loved by me not being in this performing role, giving out of duty. So then I can explore, okay, so where is that standing on? And I can realize, wow, yeah, in my childhood and most of my teenage years, I was always doing this thing because I didn't know how to be myself. Every time I would be myself, according to that time, I would feel rejected, I would feel not seen, I would feel excluded. So I started developing this role of blending in by giving, by being in service. So then I can have this wound that is the base of my fear, that if I don't do this pattern, this cycle, because these fears and wounding create this pattern, and then I get stuck. But now I know where it's coming from. So the interesting thing is that behind the fears and behind the wounds, we realize that this pattern that these two are developing there actually are needs that we're trying to meet. But we were trying to meet them by these patterns that we developed because we developed this thing in a place of less awareness, less capacities, especially when we were younger. So then I can see, for example, oh, so actually I'm trying to meet my need of feeling seen, feeling heard, being acknowledged, this need of belonging, the need of having a shared reality. It can be anything. But then I see my needs, and then I say, wow, so if I know my needs, this is the gold, this is your find, this is, okay, so I can try now with my present mindset, with my present resources to try to meet these needs directly and not going through this pattern that has been my history. So this is a huge finding that you can have when you do this exploration, because with these needs in relationships, because again, we are raised for relationships, knowing these needs, you can go now into the co-creative space. This is when you say, okay, I know what I need, and I'm going to check with the people around me, how can I meet this thing, if there's a chance? Again, not from a demanding perspective, but for what I call a reality check. So the reality checks is when you start exploring the co-creation, and it's to see if there's space for co-creation. I always say that the mildest way to make a reality check is to just say, for example, I'm not very happy about the way we talked yesterday, and I would like to see how you are feeling about it. So that's the first opening. So we can see if the person says, well, nothing happened yesterday, what are you talking about? Just go back to your thing. I realize that there can be a wall. There can be no willingness for me to co-create with this person at this moment. So this is also very important that we go into a co-creative space, we are protected, and we go slow to see if there's an opening for us to explore and express who we are. If we just come with our hearts in our hands, we can be severely damaged. And this is actually our responsibility. Be responsible for your thoughts and feelings. And this is why we're assessing reality in this case, right? Because we want to understand the truth. And the truth may be also the other person having a certain amount of resources that may not be so available or so willing or capable even of holding it. But another scenario can be that the other person says, oh, yes, actually, I don't feel so happy about that either. You know, I felt quite disconnected with you when this happened. And the other says, okay, yes, I also feel that. And then you can go into an explorative dialogue. You develop more communication, and you start seeing who is the other person, how they respond to you being yourself. How do they respond about the things that matter to you? How they respond about you feeling triggered about things, and vice versa, you know, and what happens. And this is a very important element, because if we're talking from the truth and we're only giving from generosity, and again, we're feeling responsible only about our thoughts and feelings, it can create this very beautiful space in which we share what happens, and then the other person doesn't feel demanded. Again, if we both understand that we're only responsible of our thoughts and feelings, when I say, you know what, yesterday when you left early and you didn't hug me, I felt that I was not important for you. So the other person, instead of justifying those things, but of course you're important for me, they can say, okay, I see where you're at. I see that you felt that. And I understand that that can be perfectly something that, knowing who you are, it's possible. I acknowledge the possibility. I may have functioned differently, but it doesn't matter. I see and I understand and I respect where you were at. And then I can tackle, for example, the need of the other person. Because if the other person, for example, implicitly there's the need of importance or to matter, I can say, you know what, I see why you were sad yesterday. And today and now I can tell you you're very important to me. And then you start developing even the need of reassurance, and how you can give you reassurance without trying to manage how the other person was feeling or how the other person was triggered, because you're not feeling any more responsible of that. So you don't have to say, why did you get so affected? Why did you overreact? You don't have to ask these questions. You can accept their truth of their emotional state, and then you can listen, because you're not taking it personal, and you're holding space, and you're seeing what is the space for you to contribute. And then if you feel generous, you can give. If you're not feeling generous, you can also be feeling responsible of your thoughts and feelings and realizing, wow, this expression of your situation yesterday is triggering me now, and I actually am not feeling in such a space for sharing. So actually, I believe that we should talk this in another moment, because I need to self-regulate. You know, so this can also happen. So it's also part of the co-creations. In this co-creative space, we are assessing, again, how do people see us? How do people respond to our feelings, to our truths, our own capacity of responding to others, and this co-created space that we are seeing who is available, who is capable, and respecting the truth of everybody being who they are. So this co-creation is very much based on this authenticity and very much based on responsibility of our own thoughts and feelings, acting only from generosity in the giving, and a mindset towards truth. You see, so this is when it's making sense, and the communication develops, and then more of that can happen, and the more you have these reality checks, you start developing a better understanding of who is the other one, more trust is developed, and again, the relationship grows a lot in this co-created space with just this element. But then things cannot go that well sometimes. So what happens if you feel these walls constantly? If you feel that every time we express our feelings, the other person says, no, I don't have the space for that, and they never come back to ask you, and you feel like, really like the other person is not showing any interest. Again, this is not a time to say, hey, how dare you, or why are you not doing this way? Then you can realize that maybe you need to start developing boundaries. And boundaries are connected, or basically are a commitment to yourself. If you say, well, I'm not going to keep my heart open if I don't feel willingness of the other person, this is your own commitment. So then you can express the other one, by you not expressing interest on my process in all this time, I realize that I'm closing up in my emotions and I'm withdrawing a little bit. So I'm just letting you know. And this is important. I'm telling you so you can deal with that information in any way you can. Because this is me honoring my truth and me allowing you to deal with your truth. And then you allow the other person, if they can, be considered to that, or realizing if that movement is actually not conducing anywhere, and there's going to be more and more boundaries, more and more distance even. And then you end up maybe addressing compatibility. How compatible are we? Sometimes we're just not compatible. Sometimes we try to connect, we try to develop this, we try to co-create for an amount of time, but it's not serving us. This is why I really believe that it's so important to understand this difference in which, how are we serving relationships? For me, it's important to understand that relationships are to serve us, people, and not people to serve relationships. So if this is not working for us, we really need to ask ourselves, why are we having this? Because if we are just trying to make a relationship work and try to sustain these narratives of we have to make it work, we have to stay together, this is something that is not really honoring who you are and what you need. So this is very important to address, and this is why compatibility is such an endpoint to this. And compatibility can be in so many different levels. That is basically the way you can be with someone in different scenarios. For example, with some friends you can feel very connected to and you have a very good moments in several times, and then you may ask them to move in together with them, for example. And it's a mess because they go to bed at midnight, you want to go to bed at 9, and then the other one is at morning doing exercises and waking you up, and you have different styles of living, different standards of cleanliness, different ways of dealing with the world and life. That doesn't make you less connected or loving each other less. It just means that you may not be compatible for living together. The same thing happens sometimes with couples, that they have been together for so many years and they have a beautiful family together, but then they don't feel this romantic love anymore. So sometimes they can realize, hey, maybe we're not compatible to being a romantic partnership, but maybe we can be super compatible for being co-parents. And let's make this family from that perspective. Let's not try to be trying to act from the right way of being together. Let's try to just honor the truth that we are super good being parents together, and let's honor that without trying to make it be something that is not. Okay, so element of compatibility is something that can be also very useful to get the best of who we are in these connections and honoring relationships for who we are. Okay, so just to summarize this whole thing, for me it's important that we're trying to really function and live and interact and connect from our authenticity, from our authentic self. How do we function from the most truthful being that we have? And this is something that is organic and is constantly happening. You can just feel it when you're not feeling there. So the idea is that we don't feel there in our bodies or any sense of feeling off in these elements. We're going to go and explore this element of self-work. But the idea is that we are focusing that our responsibility is only about our thoughts and feelings. When we give, we can only give truly from generosity with no expectations. Our mindsets are aimed towards the truth and what is real and who we are, and not from a sense of morality. And in this way, we can develop this sincere consideration. Okay, so we have this model, we apply the situations, we go through our own self-work, we co-create with others from the truth, and we use these resources of boundaries and assessment of compatibility whenever we feel that things are not flowing directly. So I think this can be useful for all of you, hopefully. And I think that's for today.